Welcome to This Explainer. Have you ever looked through a glass prism and just watched how a single plain beam of white light completely fractures into this brilliant, wondrous spectrum of colors? Well, the human mind is remarkably similar. It's this single, unified entity that governs absolutely everything we are. But to actually understand it, we really have to look through a prism that fractures our psychology into distinct, vibrant perspectives. Today, we're diving deep into the architecture of the mind. And as we go, you're going to notice this really fascinating recurring theme, the number 7. From our core biological wiring all the way up to our highest states of consciousness, this framework of 7 acts as a master key to unlocking exactly how we think, feel, and behave. But hey, before we get to those frameworks, we've got to ask a pretty fundamental question. How on earth do we measure the unmeasurable? I mean, think about it. If you're studying chemistry, you can just measure a chemical reaction right there in a beaker. If you're into physics, you can calculate velocity. But how can scientists possibly study something as invisible, complex, and deeply subjective as human behavior, our feelings, and our consciousness? To answer that, we really have to draw a hard line in the sand between true scientific psychology and pseudopsychology. Psychology is the empirical, scientific study of behavior and mental processes. It relies on incredibly strict scientific procedures, objective testing, and critical thinking. On the flip side, you have pseudopsychology, stuff like horoscopes, psychic powers, and those pop psych myths you see online. Now, those might look like science, and they can for sure be entertaining, but they completely lack the scientific method. To truly decode the mind, we have to rely strictly on the evidence. So here is our roadmap for today. 1. Decoding the human mind. 2. 7 lenses of psychology. 3. From genes to behavior. 4. Stages of human development. And 5. The integrated biopsychosocial model. Let's jump right in.
Okay, Section 1, Decoding the Human Mind. Subtitled, The Blind Men and the Elephant.
Let's kick things off by anchoring our history with William James. He is widely considered the father of American psychology. Back in the late 1800s, he led this incredible school of thought called functionalism. You see, rather than just looking at the static, boring pieces of the mind, James wanted to know what the mind actually does. He looked at how our mental processes actively help humans adapt to our environment, which effectively laid the groundwork for practically all the modern perspectives that followed. Then, boom, we hit a massive paradigm shift with B.F. Skinner and behaviorism. Skinner and his peers were adamant that if psychology was ever going to be taken seriously as a true science, it had to stop obsessing over invisible mental processes. They shifted the academic focus entirely to objective, observable actions, period. He used environmental conditioning to study exactly how our behaviors are learned and shaped over time. Moving right along to Section 2, 7 lenses of psychology, modern epistemological paradigms. All right, take a look at this table. Modern psychology is wonderfully pluralistic. To view the mind, we basically use 7 distinct lenses. You've got the psychodynamic and cognitive lenses, diving deep into our internal thoughts and conflicts. Then the behavioral, humanistic, and sociocultural lenses, looking outward at our actions, our free will, and the society we live in. And finally, the biological and evolutionary lenses, rooting us right back down into our physical chemistry and our ancient ancestry. To truly understand a human being today, a psychologist really has to look through all 7 of these lenses. It's like viewing that same incredibly complex elephant from 7 entirely different angles. Now, to see how just one of these lenses works in the real world, let's talk about something we're all familiar with: dating apps. Researchers looked at speed dating and smartphone dating apps right here in the United States. And get this, they found that an expansive posture, we're talking outstretched arms, spread legs, taking up space, actually increases a person's romantic appeal. But why? Well, because in American culture, this posture signals dominance, which happens to be a highly culturally desirable trait. It's a brilliant illustration of how unseen cultural values invisibly yet powerfully direct our physical behavior. That brings us to Section 3, From Genes to Behavior, subtitled The Methodological Zoom Out. To avoid getting totally lost in the weeds, scientists use this framework from the National Institute of Mental Health, called RDoC, to map the mind across 7 distinct building blocks. Think of it exactly like zooming out on a macroscope. We start way down at level 1 with microscopic genes, then we zoom out to molecules, pull back to cells, neural circuits, and systemic physiology like your heart rate. It isn't until we hit level 6 that we actually see observable behavior. And finally, at level 7, we reach self-reports, which is, the stuff you might actually tell a therapist in an interview. And this naturally brings up a major, ongoing philosophical debate. ruthless reductionism. This is the perspective that all of our higher-level psychological phenomena, your childhood memories, your sense of identity, even the love you feel for your family, can be fully reduced to and completely explained by lower-level molecular operations. It is this bold and, honestly, pretty controversial idea that absolutely everything you feel can be explained just by pointing a finger at your cells. But, as you might guess, a lot of scientists push back hard on that with something called emergentism. Think of it this way. You could have the most flawlessly detailed blueprint of a car's engine in the world, but that blueprint is never going to explain the complexities of a 5 p.m. highway traffic jam. Microanalyses often completely fail to account for contextual variance. Yes, obviously our psychology relies on our biology, but higher-order structures create these emergent properties that you simply cannot find just by staring at the individual biological parts.
So, how does this play out in us? This brings us to the proximal chemical mandate. In plain English, we are chemically, biologically wired to maximize reward and minimize stress. Out in nature, this drive is what keeps us alive. It helps us find food, stay safe from predators. In human culture, this exact same drive fuels our creativity and our endless search for meaning. But here's the catch. Dangerously, this same neurochemical reward drive can be hijacked by unnatural stimuli, resulting in really tough things like addiction. It's the exact same internal system, it's just reacting to wildly different environments.
All right, Section 4, Stages of Human Development: Ego, Morality, and Faith.
When we track human growth across three major thinkers, Jane Loevinger's ego, Lawrence Kohlberg's morality, and James Fowler's faith, a really stunning three-tier pattern emerges. Notice how we all start down at the pre-conventional tier. We're impulsive, self-centered, and mostly just focused on avoiding punishment. As we mature, we climb to the conventional tier, where we're seeking to fit in and conform to societal norms. But the ultimate goal for all of us, that's the post-conventional tier, transcending those standard rules to reach deep empathy, universal wisdom, and true self-actualization.
And that leads to a super fascinating detail. Lawrence Kohlberg originally mapped out 6 stages of moral development based strictly on logic and justice. But late in his career, he had a realization. He realized logic alone couldn't answer the ultimate existential question, why be moral in an unjust world? So he hypothesized a stage 7. This stage goes totally beyond formal justice, anchoring our moral duty in a cosmic, transcendental reality. It even introduces the concept of existential non-action, which is basically having the profound wisdom to sometimes just step back and let individuals experience their own failings so they can actually grow. Finally, we reach Section 5, the Integrated Biopsychosocial Model, the Grand Synthesis. George Engel's biopsychosocial model really serves as our ultimate integrative framework. This is the whole shebang. It proposes that human beings absolutely cannot be understood in a vacuum. Our mental and physical processes are a continuous, dynamic interaction of 3 spheres. First, your biological systems, your genetics, your neurotransmitters. Second, your psychological dispositions, your learned behaviors and mental schemas. And third, social factors, like your socioeconomic status and cultural norms. They're incredibly intertwined. You literally cannot change one without inevitably affecting the other 2. And just to show you why that social sphere matters so much, consider this. Over 70% of the world's population currently lives in collectivistic cultures. Yet, historically, so much of early psychology was only studied in individualistic ones. If you ask someone in an individualistic culture to complete the sentence "I am," they're almost certainly going to use a personal trait. I am outgoing. But ask someone in a collectivistic culture, they tend to define their identity by their social unit. I am a daughter. This simple difference fundamentally alters how we define our own identity, how we experience things like guilt, and even how we judge a person's sincerity. So, we've journeyed all the way from the microscopic molecular biology of a single cell through the 7 distinct lenses of modern science, and all the way up to the highest integrated stages of human morality and consciousness. It's a vast, beautiful, and deeply interconnected architecture. So as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a profound question to just chew on as you go about the rest of your day. When you make your next decision, when you feel a strong emotion, or when you interact with someone you really love, which level of the mind is guiding you today? Is it a deep neurochemical impulse, an unspoken cultural norm, or your own integrated sense of meaning? Thanks so much for joining this explainer. Keep exploring.